Hello there. Hi, I'm Adejare, and I'm super delighted to welcome you to another insightful and educative session of Property Matters here on YouTube. In case you're coming across a video like this for the first time, my name is Adejare, and Property Matter is a real estate YouTube talk show where we expose you to everything you need to know about real estate investments. Over time, we've talked extensively on how you can identify a fraudulent real estate transaction. We've also spoken extensively on how you can also identify a fraudulent real estate developer. Property Matter is an inciting YouTube talk show where we give you all the needed information, and these informations are intended to guide you rightly so that you will not be making a costly real estate investment decision. Once again, do well to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and I will see you immediately after this short timeout. Don't go nowhere. So on today's episode, I'm going to be talking extensively on the important things I put into consideration whenever I'm making a house recommendation to a real estate investor. Now, oftentimes I've explained several times to real estate investors that some dangers don't always seem obvious from the first instance, and that is why myself and my team have dedicated our time, our energy, our resources to ensure that we dig deeper before we make property recommendations to our real estate investors. So I want to do a building project, or you want to buy a building project. So what are those important factors that I put into consideration before I say this project is good, you can be part of it, you can go for it? Now, the first important thing that I put into consideration basically is the track record of the real estate developer. Now, when it comes to building projects, it is very important for real estate investors to understand that the reason why some real estate development companies today are struggling with not just their building projects, with several other real estate development projects that they have embarked upon, basically is due to the fact that many of them lack the expertise and the know-how on how to execute that project successfully. Now, you must also understand basically that for someone who has a sound record of, or a good record of delivery, that person understands and have the thorough experience on how to start and of course execute a building project. So the track record is very, very important. Now, in some cases, we've seen different instances whereby a real estate developer may be starting a building project for the first time, and they deliver exceptionally. In fact, their delivery most times exceed expectation. But from our level of experience, we have come to realize that such cases in some scenarios are rare. There are instances of people who started well, and in the long run they don't deliver. So the track record of the real estate development company is very, very important, and this is what we also put in one of our checklists when we are making property recommendation. Secondly, we also consider the topography of that environment. Now, we have seen several scenarios of building collapse, and this obviously is a discouraging factor for some real estate investors, more importantly those that are based in the diaspora. Now, when we talk about the cases of building collapse, now it is expected, okay, and then of course it's one of the basic requirements that a real estate development firm who intends to execute either any form of duplexes, apartments, or high-rise, they are expected, okay, to conduct what we call a soil test. Now, the soil test will now further review the kind of foundation, okay, that will be conducted or should be done before a building is erected. Now, it is quite unfortunate that in Nigeria I have personally witnessed cases of what compromise, and that is due to the fact that some of the important building regulations have been directly ignored. Now, why do we consider topography? Number one, Topography will also, give us an insight on the soil situation of the place. The topography will help us understand if that place will be durable. The topography will also help us to understand if the project has tendency of what? Sinking. Now, a lot of structures have been built across most of the part of the island, and some structures are sinking. In fact, I was somewhere in Maryland and I found out that some structures were sinking. Now, that is due to the fact that when a lot of people are building, okay, they underestimate the reason or the need to do the proper foundation. So topography. Now, in some cases, in a place where there's a need for thorough sand filling, what is the total amount of trips of sand that will be needed for that place to be durable for construction? We also need to understand that, can the developer afford to do the necessary sand filling, or does the developer have the amount of resources to do the proper foundation? Presently, right now, if a developer is to do a pile foundation, which is one of the basic requirements for those who are building blocks of flats or apartments, now the cost of doing a pile foundation right now is very expensive. And of course, the topography determines the length of the pile and how depth the pile will. The topography also determines the kind of, the German floor, the columns, and every other building, every other structures that will sustain the building. So in some cases, if there are some locations that some real estate developers are intending to build structures and they cannot afford to do that, so we also put into consideration the topography because it plays an important role. The third thing I also put into consideration whenever I want to make a building recommendation or a real estate recommendation to a real estate investor is the title document. Now, the title document, as far as Lagos is concerned, we obviously cannot underestimate the importance, neither can we overemphasize it. See, what makes property available, what makes property in your possession forever is dependent on the title document, and we cannot just stress that enough. Now, and that is why we do a lot of digging to find out the root of the title, the actual owners of the title, and we also go further to check if the developer have all the necessary approval. These are also crucial. Now, in some cases, if a real estate development company, I've seen instances whereby real estate development companies are building without the approval. Now, I've witnessed scenarios whereby government officials have to seal some buildings in the Adejare and other parts of the island. Now, in that process, many people were forced, to get the necessary approval, which ought not to be so. So we need to check, because you see, the safety and the security of your building is dependent on the developers, willingness to get all the necessary approvals so that you will not be disturbed by the government. The next thing we also put into consideration is what we call the rental opportunities. Now, there's no way we are going to talk about the rental opportunities without paying close attention to the proximity and, of course, the environment of that place. Now, when talking about the rental opportunities, it's very important for real estate investors to know that there are some places where some building structures are being done presently that the rental opportunities in that axis is limited. Now, there was a scenario of a real estate investor. She called me, we had a lengthy conversation last week, and I went to see the house that was built for her, and it was quite unfortunate that it's been 3 years since this dear real estate investor bought this property. We had to even reduce the rent so that people can pay it. So, because you see, proximity and of course the rental opportunity plays some key roles, and that's why sometimes when people talk about investing on the island, it is very important to know that it is not all places that will attract rents, that will attract tenants that can take your apartment. Not all places. Some places have bad roads, some places don't have consistent power supply, some places their water system is bad. In fact, if you don't have a water treatment plant, you may not be able to use the water. There are some places whereby the quality of the buildings are not should not conform to the rent that is being asked for. So these and many more are those important things that we put into consideration. So whenever we are making recommendations, we are not just making recommendations because the estate is trending or a lot of people are talking about it. We do what we call a visibility study, because your interest basically is one of the reasons we put into consideration, because it doesn't even make sense that after spending millions of naira on a property, you are locking that house for 6 months or 1 year and you are not getting tenant, which is not good. And that is why sometimes when we are making property recommendations, we look at the strategic locations, we looked at the amenities in that location, we looked at the road accessibility, we looked at the power supply system there. You know, these are the important considerations or the important checklists that your tenant will put into consideration before deciding to rent your apartment or not. So we also need to do that, look at that. Now, another thing we put into consideration as regards of making property recommendation, more importantly, if it's an off-plan project, is what we call the funding, which is the most important and crucial of all. Now, today we have abandoned off-plan projects situated in different places of the island. In fact, we have larger cases. As at 2003, the number of abandoned projects as at that time was around 45%. As I'm talking to you right now, it is above 65%. Now, a lot of people have attributed, you know, the economic instability as a result, while some real estate development company could not even complete, you know, the project they've sold and the project people have paid for. To an extent, economic instability plays a major role, but we also need to understand that if you want to do an off-land project, it is very important, okay, to work with a real estate development company that have what we call real estate trust fund. Now, what the real estate trust fund done basically is that for some real estate development company who want to do an off-plan project, more importantly, whether it is high-rise, whether it is duplexes, and now the trust fund basically gives them this amazing opportunity. Now, I was speaking with a real estate developer on the mainland, and he told us that he got, you know, a loan of 300 million just to get materials for his building project. So having access to loans from banks, having access to real estate trust funds, having access to funds from, you know, companies in diaspora who can invest into that project, this obviously is very crucial, because if a developer doesn't have access to all these things I've outlined, the tendency that the project will be abandoned is very, very high. And in most cases, when you are buying from a real estate developer and the developer is waiting, okay, for your monthly repayment for him to, you know, do the project you have bought for, there are tendencies that the monthly repayment will not come as scheduled, and every month things are going high. The cost of building materials are going. So what some smart real estate developer does in most cases is that they get a loan, they buy all the materials, you know, that will start and finish that project. And this is one of the most. So if a real estate development company is not properly funded, we don't recommend them. It does not matter if the estate is the talk of the town or if the property is trending and a lot of people are talking about it. Okay, there are a lot of projects that trended that was all over the social media today. They are in shambles, and these are some of the things we put into consideration. Now, one of the difference between most of the mainland real estate developers is that most of these guys have access to these funds, and it helps them to, in fact, the level of development on the highland, on some part of the mainland and some part of the island is very, very, you know, very, they are not on the same pace. So the funding is very important. In some cases, if the developer does not have access to all this funding, the tendency that real estate investor may cry at that is very high. So these are some of the things we put into consideration whenever we are making property recommendation, and this is why you need to work with us. You need to work with us. So these obviously will protect your interest, it will protect your capital, and it will protect your property. Until I come your way in another insightful and educative session of Property Matters, thank you for viewing. Do well to subscribe, and of course, call us for your next real estate investment. Bye for now. God bless you.